Ashnod, the Red Woman, apprentice and rumored lover of Mishra, Urza's brother, was an artificer gifted with brilliance to meld flesh and metal to create twisted abominations perfect for war. Sadistic, cruel, and uncaring, she would bulk the armies of Mishra during the brothers' war against Urza with zombies made of metal, bone, and 1,000 years of regret. These would be fashioned from the corpses of their dead enemies, and even those who crossed them within their own ranks. Ashnod would eventually steal the Silex, a powerful magical item akin to a thermonuclear bomb from Loran during Mishra's sacking of Teresia City. She would then take on another lover as Mishra descended into madness during the war. This lover's name was Tanos, known apprentice to Urza and a fast friend of the Artificer, destined to defeat Mishra at the site of the finale of the brothers' war. This star-crossed love would seemingly be short-lived when the demon Gix, Yawgmoth's praetor, would confront them both in combat after emerging from the caves of Koilos, which Urza and Mishra had unknowingly opened years prior to the war. Ashnod would stand alone against the massive demon, conveying the Silex to Tanos so that he could rush it to Urza's hands to attempt to end the decades-long bloodshed of the brothers' war, and to warn him of the upcoming threat that lurked in the shadows that Mishra had awakened, the threat of Yawgmoth's Phyrexia. Ashnod would, however, survive the ruinous blast of Urza's newfound Silex, and would go on to found a school for artificers in Dominaria near the Ronum Lake, where she would live her days out with her lover Tanos under a new alias of Nod.
She also nicknamed him Duck, and that's just really fucking cute, and this woman could rip my throat out and I would still be horny for her. Sorry, I don't know what came over me there. I think when we finally got the official artwork for Ashnod, something in my brain just kind of broke. And I mean, just look at her. Look at her. She could step on you and you'd smile about it. So today's deck is going to be about Ashnod. Mommy Ashnod. Ashnod the mom. Fuck! Ashnod the Uncaring. That's the one we're doing a video on. She's a 5-mana Grixis commander with an ability that's really busted in the right deck. Whenever you activate an ability of an artifact or a creature that is not a mana ability, if one or more permanents were sacrificed to activate the effect, copy that ability and choose new targets for that copy. She's also got Death Touch because she can step on me. Fuck! Okay, sorry. I just... Look, you'd let her do it too. Anyway, so this is Ashnod the Uncaring. We are going to be sacrificing lots and lots of artifacts and trying to do double duty with all the stuff we are sacrificing, and we've even got some funny haha tricks that we're going to use to make that process easier. So let's start with the ramp section so you can see what we are going to be using to get this bulky 5-mana commander with a booty out there. We have 14 ramp cards, starting with one of my favorites, Merc Convert, a 2-mana mana rock attached to a body that can tap for any kind of mana at the cost of 2 life. Then, of course, Sky Diamond, Charcoal Diamond, and Fire Diamond, all 2-mana mana rocks that we can cast very, very easily. Then we have Ornithopter of Paradise. It can tap for 1 mana of any color, which is helpful since we are a 3-mana commander, and we don't have access to green for easy mana fixing. Then we have Enthusiastic Mechanaut and Foundry Inspector as ways to make our artifacts cost 1 less. Then we have Commander Sphere, Burnished Heart, and Hedron Archive, Mindstone, and Wayfarer's Bauble. So all of these share one thing in common. They have a sacrifice clause attached to them. Command Sphere can tap for 1 mana of any color. You can sack it to draw a card. Or with Ashnod, it's going to draw us 2 cards. Burnished Heart can get 2 lands out of our deck, or with Ashnod, 3 lands. Hedron Archive can draw us 2 cards, or with Ashnod's, 4 cards, which is really, really good. Mindstone can draw us 1, turns into 2. Wayfarer's Bauble can get us 1 land. If we have Ashnod, it turns into 2 lands. And then we have Liquid Metal Torque and Sad Robot. Sad Robot, of course, because we can draw a card when it dies, and we can get a land when it comes onto the battlefield. And Liquid Metal Torque because we are a deck that has access to red, so we need to be able to turn on things like a Braid. Liquid Metal Torque is a mana rock that can also turn any non-land permanent into an artifact in addition to its other types. And you'll see why that's important here in a bit. Before we get to that, though, let's go ahead and get into our draw section. And I'm so happy we managed to get this deck to draw as many cards as we did for the price point we have. And I know it looks like the draw section only has 6 cards in it, but actually, with the incremental draw the deck has, this number is way larger than what it looks like. But let's start with Ichor Wellspring and Mephitic Drought. They both basically read the same. Enter the battlefield, draw a card. And to exit the battlefield, draw a card. Mephitic Drought also can make us lose a life when it comes into the battlefield or it dies, so be wary of that. Courier's Capsule can be sacked to draw 2 cards, or in this deck, it's going to draw us 4 cards. Thopter Spy Network can make a token every single turn, and then for every person that we get to attack, we get to draw 1 card per opponent that we smack in the face with one of our artifact creatures. And then we have the Audacious Reshapers. Sack an artifact and reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an artifact card and put it onto the battlefield, and the rest of the other cards go into the graveyard or the bottom of the library, in any order. And you deal damage to yourself equal to the number of cards that were revealed this way. Since our deck runs 40 artifacts, it's likely we're going to always hit an artifact. Then we have Eloise Nephalia Sleuth. Whenever a creature we control dies, which we'll be sacking a lot of them, so that's going to be a lot, we get to Investigate, which lets us draw 1 card. Or because of Ashnod, it lets us draw 2 cards, which is, pretty freaking swell. Eloise also says that we sack a token, we get to Surveil 1, so we can dig further and further into our deck. But I mentioned the Liquid Metal Torque and one of its synergies, so let's talk about that real quick in the 13-card removal and interaction section of the deck. So let's begin with a Braid. Blow up a creature or blow up an artifact. If we have Liquid Metal Torque out, we can just turn anything into an artifact and then blow it up with a Braid. So if somebody has an enchantment out, this can now kill an enchantment. If somebody has a Planeswalker out, this can now kill a Planeswalker. It's way better when you have things like Liquid Metal Torque, when you get to run stuff like a Braid to just blow up anything you want. Feed the Swarm is a Braid, but black. It blows up an enchantment or a creature. Then we have Dalek Drone and Noxious Gearhulk, creatures that can come into the battlefield, blow up anything, and then Noxious Gearhulk gains this life, and Dalek Drone will make our opponents lose life. And then we have a pair of counter spells, 3 of them actually: Disruption Protocol, Negate, and Assert Authority. Assert Authority has affinity for artifacts, so it's going to cost 2 most of the time that we use it, and it banishes the card that we get rid of with it. Disruption Protocol can also cost 1 less, so it's going to basically be a counter spell by tapping any of our artifacts. Speaking of artifacts, we've got Spine of Vishath and Meteor Golem as 7-mana ways of blowing up anything on the board, no matter what it is. Spine of Vishath is important, though, because if it blows up a permanent, we can then throw it into our graveyard to get its ability again. So Spine is super good for our deck. Then we have the Surgical Spell Bomb, bounce any creature to its owner's hand by sacking it, and we draw a card when we do that. We can also just sack it to draw a card if we need the card. And remember, because of Ashnod, we're going to get that ability twice. And then we have Resculpt, just exiling an artifact or a creature. Super quick, super easy removal for any deck that has blue. Finally, we have Herald of Anguish. It's got Improvise, so don't let the 7-mana cost fool you. It usually comes out for 2 or 3. It's got Flying. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent has to discard a card, so it's always generating you advantage that way. But it also says you can pay 2 to sack any artifact, make a creature get -2/-2 until end of turn. Because of Ashnod, we can make one creature take -4/-4 instead. Or we can make 2 different creatures, like 2 different tokens, take -2/-2, make 2 different Birds of Paradise get hit so that our opponents are behind on ramp. Herald of Anguish is just amazing in this kind of deck. But I mentioned sacrificing a lot of artifacts. Let's talk about those artifacts we're sacrificing. We need more ways of sacking artifacts, not just with our kill cards, but also with basically the other half of our draw package. Because like I said, our draw package is deeper than it looks. Starting with Tarian's Journal, sack an artifact or a creature, and draw a card. With Ashnod out, that means draw 2 cards, and we can discard our hand to flip it into the land that can reanimate anything in our graveyard and give it a finality counter. Because Ashnod doesn't care about whether creatures die, she only cares that they were sacrificed. Keyword, the Tomb of Alcatraz does a lot of work for us because we don't care about our die triggers on a lot of our cards. We just care that they got sacked, period. Then we have Chronomancer. Sack any artifact to draw a card, and we can unearth it to pull it back out. Then we've got Trading Post. We can use it to discard a card and gain 4 life. Pay a life to make a goat token. Sack a creature and get an artifact from our graveyard to our hand. Note, that's 2 artifacts because of Ashnod. Or sack an artifact to draw a card. Note, that's 2 cards because of Ashnod. Then we have Oni Colt Anvil. When one or more of our artifacts leave the battlefield, make a 1/1 construct artifact token. And we can also sack it to make an opponent lose, or all opponents lose 1 life, and we gain a life. But with Ashnod, we get to copy that too. Sage of Latnam, sack an artifact, draw a card. With Ashnod, that reads 2. And then, why does nobody play this card? Why is this card not played in more commander decks? Ayara, Widower of the Realm. We can tap her to sack a creature or an artifact and deal X damage to any opponent or battle and gain X life, where X is that permanent's mana value. So I mentioned we've got stuff like the Spine of Ishath, which we can use to blow up anything on the board, and then it wants to die. So if we sack the Spine of Ishath to Ayara, we're gaining it 7 life, and we're making an opponent lose 7 life. But because of Ashnod, we're actually slamming somebody in the face for 14 life, and we are gaining 14 life. It's really, really good here. But don't worry, she's got a backside in case you wanted to stare at her butt. It's a 4/4 creature we can get with 5 mana and 2 life. At the beginning of combat on our turn, return any artifact or creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield for free, and give it haste, and then exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Just get back Meteor Golem and then sack him. Just get back my son and sacrifice him a billion times. He's the real sad robot, but he's always taking somebody with him because misery loves company. I wish more people played Ayara. This woman is wonderful. Then we have Stormclaw Razor, sack an artifact or a creature to draw a card and put a 1/1 counter on the Rager. That's sorcery speed only, but we can do it as many times as we have mana, and it draws us 2 cards and gets 2 1/1 counters because of Ashnod. So this guy can get really big really, really quick, or this girl can get really big really, really quick. And then we have Completed Huntsmaster, something that's kind of broken in this deck. It's a 2/3 we get for a penny. Pay 1 and sack a creature or artifact to incubate 3. Which means we get one of those weird tokens that can flip, that change the rules of Magic the Gathering, for reasons. But note, it says you create an artifact. The Incubate token's an artifact. Even if you never flip the Incubate token, it's an artifact. So Completed Huntmaster, because of our commander, gets to sack an artifact to create 2 artifacts. And then we get to sack one of those 2 artifacts to create 2 more artifacts. Over and over and over and over and over again. Yes, we can only do it once every turn cycle because of its tapping effect, but the fact that we always go positive with this effect is absolutely nutty, and it is wonderful. But since we are sacrificing so many of our artifacts and creatures, we do need ways to get those out, which leads us to the reanimation section. Let's go ahead and talk about what we've got here, starting with Emery, Lurker of the Loch. This card costs 1 less for every artifact we control, and it enters the battlefield, makes us mill 4 cards. Not the most important effect on the card. The most important one is that we can tap it, choose an artifact in our graveyard, and then cast it this turn. So we can get back, of course, our Meteor Golem, or really anything we want. Then we have Doom Necromancer. We can tap it and sack it to get a creature from our graveyard to our battlefield, but because of our commander, this actually gets us 2 creatures to our battlefield. Scrap Trawler says every time one of our artifacts dies, we can get another one from the graveyard to our hand if its mana value is less than the one that we had. So this is getting us lots of cards constantly. It doesn't get to double up its effect because of our commander, though, so please note that. Vat of Rebirth, every time one of our artifacts or creatures goes away, we put an oil counter on the vat. We can remove 4 oil counters from the vat. Return a creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield at sorcery speed. This card does a ton of work, and yes, I see you. The person who keeps saying Vat of Rebirth has been noted. We got a couple of people who were like, every time Suris mentions Meteor Golem, I take a shot, or Vat of Rebirth was mentioned, take a shot. I see you guys. Y'all are cool. Altar of Ball. God, how many cards can y'all make drinking games off of me with? Vat of Rebirth, Meteor Golem, Honored Heirloom. Huh. Maybe I need a different shtick. Anywho, Altar of Ball. Exile a creature you control to return any creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield as many times as you want, as long as you've got mana and can tap it, only at sorcery speed. So usually this just reads, get rid of a token, summon a creature from your graveyard. That's what it reads. So, not summon, because that's not what's happening. It's putting a creature from the graveyard onto the battlefield. Still, great card. Scrap Welder, sack an artifact with mana value X, return an artifact with mana value X or less to the battlefield. It gains haste this turn. Scrap Welder actually gets 2 artifacts because of our commander, so that's really, really cool. And then we have Draw Spellbomb, a 1-mana artifact that can get us creatures from our graveyard to our hand, drawing us a card by paying 3 mana and sacrificing it, which of course, because of our commander, is actually happening twice. So our deck has a lot of ways of sacking cards and recurring them, but what about if we want more copies of the cards we've chosen to play? Well, then of course, we've got a couple ways of cloning our cards, starting with Mirrorworks. Whenever a non-token artifact ETBs, pay 2 to copy that card, and Saheeli, which can tap to pay 2 to create a token that's a copy of any creature artifact you control, except it also gains artifact if it didn't already have it. And it gains haste. You sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, but because we have so many ways to sacrifice, that's actually pretty fine, all things considered. We're not super concerned about that. But note, because we have these ways to clone things, let's go ahead and talk about our token section. It is 6 cards deep, and because we have cloning, there's some important stuff here. So, let's start with the Detective Satchel. When it ETBs, put 2 clue tokens onto the battlefield. We can then sack them, of course, to draw multiple cards because of our commander. We can also tap it to get a 1/1 Thopter token with flying, only if we have sacrificed an artifact this turn. Mirror Battlesphere can get us 4 mirrors when it comes out, and every time it attacks, tap any number of mirrors to give it XO until end of turn. So we're going to be sacking this guy and letting him come back repeatedly with stuff like Iara so that we can get an army of mirror tokens. Speaking of armies, Davros creates a black Delic every time if an opponent has lost 3 or more life this turn. But its second effect is also really neat. Each opponent who lost 3 or more life this turn faces a villainous choice. You get to draw a card or they discard a card. So this guy's generating us tons of advantage during the turns where our deck is popping off. But we now need to talk about Pentavis. This guy's kind of neat in our deck because of how Ashnod works. It comes into the battlefield with 5 1/1 counters. You can remove a counter to make a Pentavite come out, or you can sack a Pentavite to put a 1/1 counter on Pentavis. You must pay 1 mana for that every time. So we remove a counter by using a mana, make a Pentavite, we sack a Pentavite, it puts 2 1/1 counters on Pentavis because of how our commander is worded, which means any turn that we have excess mana, we are sinking that mana into building a bigger Pentavis so that we can either swing it at people for bigly damage, or we can use it to spawn an army of just bonkers tokens. But now, Pentavis's bigger and better power-crept brother, Threefold Thunderhold, ETBs with 3 1/1 counters. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, it creates 1/1 gnomes for every power that it has. So that always means 3 gnomes in the beginning. We can sack an artifact to put 3 1/1 counters on the Threefold Thunderhulk. So it's going to put 2 1/1 counters every time we sack 1 artifact because of Ashnod. So he's going to get huge, punch somebody in the face, they're going to chump block, and we're going to spawn like a billion gnomes, and they're going to wonder what the hell happened to their underpants. But all those gnomes don't win us the game on their own. They can, however, do nasty things when we combine them with Brutaclad, the Telcor Engineer. All our creature tokens get haste, and at the beginning of combat on our turn, we get to make a blue Phyrexian Mirror, and then we can choose a token we control. Every single token we control becomes a copy of that token. Remember how we have ways to create copies of any of our artifacts on the board? Now we can make really busted plays, and I'll show you when we go to our WinCon section one of the things that Brutaclad really wants to see and copy. Let's go ahead and look at it. Now in this deck, we do have 3 main win cons and then a funny haha strategy we'll get into in a bit, but let's go ahead and look at the 3 win cons that we are going to be focusing on in the deck. Agent of the Iron Throne, as we sacrifice our creatures or artifacts, we'll get to make all of our opponents lose 1 life, which is a good rate of return, but Mirkwood Bats basically does it double. Anytime we create or sacrifice a token, every opponent loses 1 life. So as we're doing the Threefold Gearhulk stuff, as we're doing the Pentavite stuff, as we're doing the Mirror Battlesphere stuff, we are going to be killing people with lots and lots of incremental damage all at once. But, how to say this? Remember how I said that we have a couple ways to create token copies in the deck from before? Let's look at Dragonspark Reactor. Every single time another artifact enters the battlefield under our control, we put a charge counter on the reactor, then we can pay 4, sack it, deal damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to any player, and that much damage up to 1 target creature. So, here's what we're going to be doing with this. We drop it on the battlefield, let it gain incremental stuff. Our opponents will forget about it eventually. We create a clone of it with something like Saheeli, and then Brutaclad will turn all of our tokens into copies of the Dragonspark Reactor. And remember, Brutaclad changes those tokens permanently. So now that we have 8, 9, 20 Dragonspark reactors, we let cards like Threefold Gear Hulk, Pentavis, and Mer Battlesphere plop a ton of tokens out onto the battlefield en masse. Now all of our Dragonspark reactors will have not 1, not 2, but somewhere between 10 and 12 charge counters. By this stage in the game, if any of our opponents even blinks at us the wrong way, we just look at them and go, all right, I'm just going to make 3 of my Dragonspark reactors blow the hell up in your face. And life is going to be good. Peachy keen for me and me alone. And every single turn, when an opponent looks at us wrong, we just ignite more Dragonspark reactors and kill them with them. This is not only a win con, it's a threat and a promise. A promise that we plan on making good on every single time our opponents try to look at us the wrong way. So, now remember, Dragonspark Reactor sacrifices itself to do that effect. Ashnod is doubling that. So not only are we creating a billion clones of Dragonspark Reactor, we're also getting twice that many explosions on everybody's face. If we have 12 mana, easy to do with the amount of ramp in our deck, and we have 4 Dragonspark Reactors on the board, we just sacrifice 3 of them, and if they've got 4 or 5 charge counters, we look at one opponent and go, hey buddy, did you like 30 damage? Did you like 40 damage? No? That's too bad, because my enemy just ended his turn, and I need to sink my mana before my turn begins. So you get to die, and the commanders of the other 2 players get to blow up as well as what other little dorks they have on the board that we don't want them to have any longer. Speaking of their dorks, we're going to move away from the win cons to get into our 2 board wipes. We have Decree of Pain and Necromantic Selection. Necromantic lets us blow up the entire board and then reanimate 1 creature. That's just going to be our Ashnod 9 times out of 10. And then Decree of Pain, destroy all creatures, draw a card for every card destroyed. Or usually we're just going to cycle it for 5. Then it'll let us draw a card and then neg 2 all the creatures on the board. And of course that means that Ashnod will survive that because she has a thick booty. But there's one card that I've neglected to mention this entire time, and it's off in its own area. It's in the, you see what I've labeled it here on Moxfield. By the way, when you're looking at any of my decks on Moxfield, if you're wondering why the budgets are what they are, hit the TCG player button instead of the Card Kingdom button. That'll give you the TCG player prices. That's what I base the budget decks on. And you can also click Enable Tags, and that will let you see the actual tag setup that I'm using here, so you can see which area all the cards slot into, so you can slot in your own cards if you want to trade stuff out and move away from the $15 budget. But let's look at Liquid Metal Coating. Any permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. Anyone. That means we can turn our opponent's stuff into an artifact and blow it up with things like a braid. Or we can do something really nifty. So, remember how I said that we have a lot of ways to draw that are hidden in our deck? Well, now you're going to see the ways to ramp that are hidden in our deck. I was very confident when I said that our deck could get to really ludicrous amounts of mana very, very quickly, and we would have mana to sink into Dragonspark Reactor and all of our effects. Let's look at our land section. We have 10 fetching lands, and only one of them doesn't work with this. Ash Barrens can basic land cycle for any color that we're missing. That's cute, that's important, but that's just cute. That's all it is. Shire Terrace, Esper Panorama, Jund Panorama, Grixis Panorama, Terramorphic Expanse, Escape Tunnel, Promising Vein, and Evolving Wilds. All of these read the same thing functionally. Some of them come into play tapped, some of them don't. That's not what's important. What's important is they say sacrifice them to grab one, count it, one basic land from our deck onto the battlefield. Right? That's what they say. That's what the cards say. We're going to use Liquid Metal Torque on our lands. And when we do that, we are going to then get 2 lands out of our deck every time we sacrifice one of our 10 lands. 9, technically, because Ashnod copies any artifact or creature, and Liquid Metal Torque is turning our lands into artifacts. So now Shire Terrace is getting us 2 lands. Esper Panorama is getting us 2 lands. Oh, did I mention Myriad Landscapes in here too? That's getting us 4 lands on the battlefield. These lands here are getting us all kinds of stuff at super fast speeds because of our commander. We get our commander on the battlefield, we get her online, and then we just start sinking a ton of mana into our stuff. Our commander dies, we reanimate her with one of our 7 ways of recurring her, and we just keep going. We just keep pushing more and more mana out of our deck. Now, of course, we also have Omni Lands, Crumbling Necropolis, Crypt of the Eternals, Command Tower, and Exotic Orchard. These are all lands that in some way, shape, or form can get us the mana that our deck is missing. And then, of course, we have some dual lands in the deck as well: Smoldering Marsh, Sunken Hollow, Darkwater Catacombs, and Shadow Blood Ridge. But because of the massive fetching package in the deck, 17 of our lands are all basics, because we want to be able to take a bunch of these out of the deck at lightning speed with the fetching lands that I mentioned before. But we've got 2 utility lands as well. Buried Ruins can sacrifice itself to return any artifact from our graveyard to our hand. We can, of course, turn this into an artifact and then get 2 artifacts from our graveyard using that. And the Havengul Laboratory is a legendary land that can investigate for us, which, of course, means we can use those clue tokens a lot, because Ashnod is doubling up the effect of those clues. And if we sacrifice 3 or more clues, we can then flip it into the Havengul Mystery. When this land transforms, return any creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Yes, that's right, it's another reanimation spell hidden in our cards. When that creature is put onto the battlefield with Havengul and it leaves the battlefield, we then transform it again back into its vanilla version, which can then draw us more cards throughout the game. Havengul Laboratory is an excellent card in this deck. It is pulling a lot of weight. Most of the cards in this deck tend to serve double and triple functions, because when we sacrifice, we are getting multiple effects chained on one another because of how Ashnod works. This card is wonderful, and ever since the Mishra Precon came out, I've been wanting to find a way to build her, and this $15 challenge has been a perfect excuse to go ahead and make an Ashnod the Uncaring deck, because I just want her to step on my... Anyway, I think she is an awesome commander. I think your guys are going to have a wonderful time with her. If you like playing Grixis, if you like sacrificing cards, if you like artifact decks, she is punching well above her weight class for this. You can do a lot of upgrades in here as well. You can give things like Thoughtcast and Thought Monitor into the draw section if you want some smoother draw. If you want to make the ramp section even smoother, you can add other cards that can sacrifice for lands into there as well. If you want the reanimation section to be stronger, you've got a few options with things like, obviously Reanimate, and things like the now new reprinted Necromancy, which we can turn into an artifact with things like Liquid Metal Coating. The Removal and Interaction package, obviously you can add things like the Necron package into here to increase the breadth of what this is doing if you would like. Your sack outlets, of course, you can add in the cards that can sacrifice cards and draw cards. Things like Dockside Chef can go in here as well if you want to increase the draw power of the deck as you go. You could also put in the WinCon section a Disciple of the Vault if you want to upgrade that a little bit. And the token creation, I don't know how much further you could push the token creation, but I'm sure y'all can find some wonderful ways of doing that. The other upgrade I would do to this deck if I was taking it outside of the budgetary restriction, obviously putting a bunch of fetch lands in the deck, because the fetch lands would all benefit from the same abilities that the Shire Terrace do. I would put in some tutoring to make sure that Liquid Metal Coating can come out quickly. And I think, honestly, past that, I would probably put in the sack outlet section something like an Ashnod's Altar. Something that, when combined with the threefold Gear Hulk, can make us go infinite on our tokens with how Ashnod works. So I think that would be the main thing, just getting an Ashnod's Altar into this deck. If I had the budget for it in this build, it would have gone in immediately. But of course, if you put it in, once you have Ashnod out, Ashnod's Altar, threefold Gear Hulk, and Ashnod herself, they just go infinite with one another. And if you have Ancient or Mirkwood Bats on the board, suddenly you are just rocketing yourself into astronomical amounts of damage. So I wanted to go ahead and go over some of the upgrades you could do for the deck as well, just very, very briefly, because I know people have been asking, hey, I want to play this deck, it looks really fun, but what upgrades would I do? And so every now and again, when it's a deck that I'm really passionate about, I want to go ahead and talk about some of those upgrades as well. I won't do it all the time, but for Ashnod, because she is... I can do it for Ashnod. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. This deck was a ton of fun to make. The lore was a ton of fun to get into, and I just like Ashnod. Okay. Anyway, thank you all for being here. We passed 2,500 subscribers, and it's been an amazing ride so far. As always, y'all. Insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.